Hey guys, welcome back to Freak Week. What are you doing? If you haven't heard of Freak Week yet, you're gonna have to get caught up because we are doing an entire week of Halloween themed videos and topics that you guys have requested over the last year. I've been saving them all for Freak Week. And today we are going to be talking about the highly requested Salem Witch Trials. And I have some very interesting information for you guys about it. And before we get started with that, I want to remind you guys about the limited edition Freak Week shirt. It is a sugar skull. It's so cute. It's got the galaxy background. These videos that I'm doing for Freak Week are very hard to get monetized. The scary topics for some reason are considered not to be advertiser friendly. If you want to support this channel and support Freak Week for next year, consider buying a shirt. They're pretty cool, must say. Now, I think before we talk about Salem, we just need to talk about witch trials in general and go back, a couple hundred years before the Salem witch trials even happened. And I just want you guys to keep in mind that back then, things were pretty whack. There was barely any real regulation. There was not a good judicial system. So weird things like this could happen. And back in the 1300s, during the time of the bubonic plague, people really started to target Catholics, actually. Many groups wanted to bring down the Catholic Church, thought they were getting too powerful, and they were using things like magic and spells and witchcraft and stuff. And so it became this major war from witchcraft type things, which now, keep in mind, I'd probably be considered a witch for believing in astrology and really any of the things I believe, or anyone who believes in Reiki or crystals or anything alternative, I guess, would probably be considered a witch. So it was really in the 1300s where it became outsider versus the religious insider. There were tons of trials. It was really popular in Europe. It was really, really popular in Europe. Tons and tons of people were being accused of being witches. Now, this was mostly women. Now, it was overwhelmingly women that were being targeted. There was even times where Jewish people were considered to be in the same category as witches. Stuff that wouldn't fly today. A lot of just discrimination and, well, I guess maybe today. But there was a lot of fear from Catholic men, mainly, that were the ones pushing this against women, women who were alternative, poor women, widowed women, situations like that, or slaves were often the ones that were looked at for being witches. Now, let's jump back to Salem. This came across the seas to Salem in the 1600s from a guy named Cotton Mather. Now let me tell you about this guy, Cotton. Cotton was a real fucker. He had some very choice things to say about women, and he was very afraid of the devil, and he really was the one that got everyone in Salem hyped up about witches. And back at the time that this happened, this is literally 17th century pre-revolutionary America. It is a fucking mess, to be honest. The colonies were a mess. There was no good legal system put into place, no good judicial system. There was no checks and balances, so bullshit happened all the time. There were trials that were complete bullshit happening all the time. And the Salem witch trials really got started when a minister's daughter and his niece both were having severe convulsions, hallucinations, and muscle spasms. This is some devil compels you type of shit. Instead of thinking they were sick or having some type of disease or something, they just assumed that the girls had been messed with by witches. The girls were also having loud outbursts, so people wanted someone to point fingers at, and being a witch back then was a really scary thing. It wasn't ooh, witches like we have now. It wasn't cool. It was very looked down upon. There were more and more girls in the town that were having the same symptoms, and they assumed that there must be some devil's work, witchcraft going on in the town. So the first person that they blamed was actually a woman named Tituba. She was actually the slave of the minister whose daughters got sick. They also accused a beggar named Sarah Good and a widow named Sarah Osborne. There were tons of other people in the trial as well, but these were kind of the first ones. And the first one to come forward and admit that she was a witch was Tituba. And it's really important to keep in mind that her confession only came after days of testimony and scrutiny. It's very possible she just wanted to say it so that maybe they would let her off the hook or try to help her or something. Not the case. And more women were getting roped into it, being accused of being a witch. And back then, if you looked down upon these trials at all or were going against the system, a lot of people just stayed quiet, because if you were to out loud to say this is crazy, you can't do this to these people, you could be considered a witch as well. It was a really intense situation. I think most of the people in the town knew it wasn't right, but they were either scared because there was so much disease and stuff, and they were worried that the girls really were possessed, or they were just keeping their mouth shut to survive. There was absolutely no fair trial. They had all these crazy ways of determining things. One was called a witch cake, and I'm not even kidding you, it was rye mixed with the urine of the person who was apparently bewitched, which bewitched is a real diagnosis. Bewitchment was actually what these people were diagnosed with. They would make these cakes out of rye and the urine of the person who was bewitched or bewitchment. And they would mix them and make these little cakes, and they would feed it to a dog. And if the dog started having the same symptoms, they were able to determine that there was witchcraft involved. Now, it's really, really crazy when you think about it. So in Salem in 1692, 20 people were killed after being accused of being a witch, men and women, mainly women. All of them were hanged except for one man who was, this is terrible. This is what makes this all scary too. They literally would lay a board on someone, like a door or something, a wood board, and then they'd slowly put stones on it until the person was just crushed. One by one, it's very, very scary to think about.
The 2-year-old Thomas Brophy has kept in his family.
And this area here shows what was, as it says here, Gallows Hill.
Coincides with what the city of Salem confirms this week to be the exact site of the infamous hangings of 19 people.
It's the probable place of executions.
From the 1692 Salem Witch Trials.
This right here is in your backyard.
Like I say, we've always kind of lived with the suspicion that it was. And this is what they call Proctor's Ledge. This is what you're standing on right now, this ledge.
The homeowner tells me that this is the spot where the accused witches were hung. Many across town say they could see them hanging from this hill.
If there was people hanging from a tree right here, they'd be definitely visible.
There are a couple different theories as to why this happened. One of them being ergot. Now this is a theory I really believe Linda Caporal came up with, this theory of ergot. So ergot is actually a fungus that grows on rye grain, and they knew that it existed back then, but they thought it was actually the sun cooking parts of the rye, so they didn't know that they weren't supposed to consume it. But ergot is a fungus, and it's a poison. This type of fungus is literally referred to as nature's LSD. This stuff does crazy things to people. There was a rainy season, and they think that the fungus was developing underneath, and it wouldn't have been harvested until the following year, and that's when people started to get sick. There's tons of stories of ergot having plagued entire groups of people and had mass hysteria and disease and all types of weird events that we now know were caused by the consumption of this poison. Symptoms of it are hallucinations, convulsions, and muscle spasm. So basically they just ate some moldy bread and went insane. I think that's probably the most likely theory. However, there are people that think this was just town bullshit, basically, that people were going off of rumors, which still happens. People still lie and make up rumors all the time. There definitely are petty people that make stuff up, and they think that maybe this was petty girls just trying to get attention or something like that. And another big thing is that the town really did believe in witches. It's scary. The occult was a major freaky thing back then. I mean, there wasn't Halloween and stuff, so that stuff was really, really a threat to people, and people were definitely scared of witches. Then there's people that think that this was just the cold weather that made people go crazy. You know, they say seasonal depression. Basically, there's people that think that they had all types of issues because it was extra cold that year, and basically took the anger out on these witches for their crop failure and other issues. Now, I really do think it's ergotism. It makes complete sense. I definitely think that's what happened here, and thankfully we know about it now. And when you wonder why something like this happens, this is the result of a government that is out of control and unchecked. And so I really think it really shows us, it hasn't been that long. You know, our government's come a long way, but always have some skepticism towards them, because at the end of the day, we had shit like this going on all the time. There's so much unfair things and so many, and it's easy to see now how an entire town could be brainwashed. And that's why it's so important, I think, to question everything around you, but that's a whole nother topic. I think another reason that these women were really targeted was, you know, people that were afraid of overthrow of the church or alternative medicine. That's a huge thing. There was a lot of healers and women that were healing with herbs and, you know, holistic healing type things, which I think is really cool and has been around for thousands of years. And I think there was somewhat of a threat towards doctors, and they wanted to control medication. I think there's so many different reasons why this happened, but I definitely think the fungus on the bread is what really caused the Salem Witch Trials, which is just crazy. Now, it's really important to note that witch trials still happen in parts of the world to this day. So it's still an issue. I don't think a lot of people know that.
We're standing on Proctor's Ledge on Gallows Hill in Salem. My ancestors is Roger Toothaker, and he actually was arrested and died in prison while awaiting trial for witchcraft in 1692. There are literally millions of people alive today who are descendants of people involved in the Salem Witch Trials.
Salem now has a memorial at an infamous site of the witch trials. 325 years ago, 5 women were hanged. Today at Proctor's Ledge, the site of those hangings, the city dedicated a memorial to the 20 people put to death for witchcraft. The semicircular stone wall memorial is inscribed with the names of those hanged at that site.
The truth is that the lessons from Salem are not just learned once, but must be learned and relearned by each generation. We must never forget what happened and what can happen.
Community Preservation Act grant and many smaller donations from descendants of those accused of witchcraft paid for that memorial.
So that's it for me today, freaks. Be sure to catch up on my previous Freak Week videos, as well as stay tuned for the ones that are to come. I hope you're having a great day, and I will see you next time. Bye.